We're talking about Margaret Atwood's writing advice today. So if you have a favorite work of hers, please leave that down below. If not, please go ahead and let me know what novel inspired you to write. I'd be excited to see if I've read it or not, or if I should add it to my TBR. As you already may know, some of her works include Cat's Eye, finalist for the 1989 Booker Prize, Alias Grace, which won the Giller Prize in Canada and the Premio Mondello in Italy, The Blind Assassin, winner of the 2000 Booker Prize, the Mad Adam Trilogy, and Hagseed. Let's get into it. First, the story and plot. Before you start writing, you are 100% free to expand your reference of story because it will expand your depth of story knowledge. If you are interested in having a large toolkit in stories, draw from stories that have been around before you. And by before you, we mean way long before you or I have been around. This includes Greek and Roman myths, folk tales, indigenous stories from North or South America, the different African mythologies, and of course, religious texts like the Bible. Margaret says your story needs to have events and characters. She basically stresses that you cannot have one without the other. Characters need plot and plot needs character. And if everything is perfect all the time, it's not a story. A good story has to have something happening in it that is interesting to the characters and by extension, hopefully interesting to the reader. When beginning your story, remember that it needs to break an interruption in a pattern to get it going. Lots would call this the catalyst, call to action, or inciting incident. On to the characters. First things first, your characters don't have to be likable. At the very least, compelling. To create compelling characters, Atwood recommends defying gender norms. And when I heard this, I thought, maybe that's why people really are obsessed over these book boyfriends, because maybe they sort of defy the gender norms or just the norms of what your typical or average man, what they do or don't do in real life relationships. Something Atwood likes to do to get to know her characters better is create a chart with months on the y-axis and years on the x-axis. On the chart, she puts the character's birth date and any major world events that happened. She uses 9/11 as an example. If the character was 12 or older, for example, it probably left an impression on them. If they were 2, it probably didn't. And I know 9/11 is a real event, but this can work in like fantasy too, because obviously you have to do world building. So you should know the history of the world that you've created, the planet, the society. So you can do this with characters that are not necessarily living in times that are real. It can work for fantasy, sci-fi, whatever it is you choose. She reminds you that if you're not writing from a point of view that is yours, that you should have a person who is more like that character review your work to see if they can pick up on any small details or big ones that may be inaccurate. As for dialogue, if your characters talk to each other, make sure it's for a reason, not just for them to be chatting. This should be moving the plot forward or to reveal something about the characters or their desires, for example. Also, it's important to know your character's vernacular. This is important so that if there isn't like a tag, or if you aren't saying that this specific character is talking, the reader is going to be able to know who is talking just by how the specific character speaks. All right, and just like that, we're already at the end. This is the last section here, and it's basically how to tell your story / how to write. Atwood advises, she warns, she cautions that the first 5 pages of your novel are very important. They are the door to your novel, as described by this masterclass, and by extension, the first page and the first sentence are quite important too. If you can't get the reader through the first page, they will likely not read your book. Additionally, you should not overload them with information within the first 5 pages. In Atwood's opinion, the single shortest, best opening sentence of a novel is by Moby Dick. Call me Ishmael. What's packed in that, she says, is his name and a handful of questions. Why do we need to call him that? Who is he speaking to? And also, another famous one is A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. As you can imagine, where you start in your story and the order you tell the events in your story can make a big difference. Consider this carefully when brainstorming, outlining, and everything in between, before and after. And as far as point of view, if you realize that it needs to be switched, don't be discouraged. Atwood says that this is not uncommon, and it's going to be worth it to improve your story. Atwood also recommends writing with the senses, but to be intentional with it. If you struggle with writing the senses, Atwood says you can practice by observing the ordinary and particular. You might be able to enhance your sensory perception also by closing off one of your senses and seeing what you can pick up with the other. And that is the end of the video. I hope you really enjoyed this and you took something from it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Till next time. Bye.